Well, hello there. I'd like to introduce you to Ramon. Ramon has a bachelor's of electrical engineering and a master's of the science of Oriental medicine. He's worked for the Department of Defense, as well as been an entrepreneur for 12 years. In 2017, he created the Electric Universe Gateway, which has evolved into the Electric Pulse. Link will be in the description, which is a social media site and academic archive for the EU and plasma community. He began writing papers in 2018 on EPEMC, Extended Plasma Electromagnetic Cosmology, in an effort to create a peer review structure for EU-PU as well. Interesting. As diffusionism, catastrophism, his work for the Ancient Kentucky Historical Association has helped him find rare mounds and discoveries of the Thunderbolts. But he welcomes peer review of the papers so we can all learn together. Anyone can write an EPEMC paper, and he has left tools for the community in place. I agree with that, sharing and learning. Additionally, he has a clinical practice where he has become the first to definitively tie acupuncture and pain treatment into electric fields. That just makes common sense. And has created the most advanced meridian electrical circuit fractal wave model currently in existence. Next show I'll have to ask him about that. That sounds interesting. So without further ado, I bring you Ramon. Now back to King Arthur. Arthur came to America because of the comet?
Yeah. So there was a comet disaster, and depending on how you read it, the date is conventionally you'll see 535 or 565. It depends on if you date by the birth of Jesus or the death of Jesus, because in the old days they actually dated by the death of Jesus.
I never heard this before.
But so it was 565 is really for us was when it came, but in the records you see 535 because Jesus was 30 years old when he was crucified. So 565 is when it really happened, but they already knew of America. You understand? They have never had reason to come here until that point, and then they came here en masse, and it didn't go so well. The Welsh records specifically say.
Hello, are you there? Ramon?
Who eventually kill Arthur. It's actually King Arthur II, and the King Arthur II is the famous one. But there's 4 King Arthurs in the family tree, so you have to be specific as to which King Arthur you're talking about. It's not the King Arthur that defeated the Romans. It's the second King Arthur. Arthwis ap Muerig. Arthurus ap Muerig. So you have to be very specific as to which one, All right, so I'm going to download these 2 for you.
That's funny. My dad used to tell me Arthur's story going to bed, but I don't know, all that.
No, that's all romance.
Yeah.
That stuff is, basically total myth.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I always thought. The Ojibwa, whitetail is going.
And then I have a whole paper.
You're cutting out.
There? Are we having?
Yeah, we are. You're cutting out on me.
Now? Well, I turned off my Wi-Fi so it'll be on cellular data. Is that better?
I don't know. Right.
Okay.
So far,
we'll try it out.
So far, it's not. But
yeah. Okay. All right. So bear in mind that the Welsh thing is really problematic because it was written in stones, but then because of certain.
I'm losing you. Damn. I've lost you. Hello? I'm sorry, I'm having problems here. You're gone. Battle with giant animals. This is really interesting stuff, man. I wish I would have known this before. I could have read it.
There we go.
Okay.
All right. There we go.
I can see. I don't know why.
I had an interfering call come in, and I had to and that disrupted. All right, so back to what I was saying is that
Yeah.
the stones recorded everything, and people have argued that Colbrin is not a real script, but I've gone and proven that Colbrin is actually a plasma script, and there's proof that it's a plasma script because there are Chinese symbols that have the same meaning. So the Colbrin runes, they
Yeah.
have names. They have names,
Hmm.
and about 5 of the 20 runes have exact same shape and meaning in Chinese. And so I have a whole paper showing that, and that's really important because a lot of people aren't going to believe um, the Arthur story, even though it's in Welsh stones. But they'll say that it's because Colburn's made up, but it's not made up, and I've proven that too. So, but I'm not the originator of that research. Those fellows are over 90 years old, and I mean it's just unbelievable what they've been through. It's similar to the Velikovsky situation, maybe not quite as vicious, but just as heartbreaking in some ways.
I think I
Um,
saw something on Rich Planet about it. Yeah.
yeah, their name is Wilson and Blackett,
Hmm.
and the work that they did was absolutely phenomenal. But unfortunately, they've just been really ignored. Despite, I mean, they have details about the Arthurian family that are unbelievable. I was able at one point to put the entire family onto genie.com and had it out. It had over 200 members in the family. And then unfortunately, Genie deleted the whole thing. And I don't know why they did that. And they never replied back. And that was really unfortunate because it took me about 2.5 hours of cross referencing all of their research books and putting it together. It was very frustrating. Very frustrating.
Yeah. That's interesting. I always assumed it was just a myth. You
No,
know.
not at all. Not at
Wow.
all. But it's not separate from the Saturn myth because they derived their power. Bear in mind that these Welsh Welsh Celtic kings were descendants of the Etruscans and of Troy,
Okay.
and that means that they were possibly one of the lost tribes of Israel, and so they definitely derive their authority from the Lord. That was their big thing. Then they became Christians, so they really were full in on it. They
Hmm.
were they had this kind of quasi pagan Christianity, which is gone now. Obviously, it's all been replaced since the Anglo-Saxon takeover. And but when the in the 19 or 1800s, the English establishment made it illegal, really, to speak Welsh and stuff, and so a lot of people lost connection to those stones. But the people there, many of them, still know the stories.
Mm.
All right,
Okay.
so
Not. Yeah.
I'm downloading these papers, and I'm gonna share them to in the chat.
In the chat.
Just a second, and it's gonna take me a second to.
All right. Yeah. I just hope I can follow along. I'm a real rookie with this whole Skype thing. Now, what is this battle with giant animals? What's that all about?
Well, that's not, of course, my translation. I've cited that, but go ahead and read through that. I think it's a Navajo story, if I remember correctly. But I don't remember. There's a few of those. I've included all that in the paper. That one's, I think, from Ortiz, translation from Ortiz.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Turned to
it's
evil and
fantastic.
forgot their
All about
connection to
Thunderbolt.
the Creator. Huh. Wow.
Yeah, a lot of people thought that humans were the cause of these thunderbolts. The angering the gods. Okay,
Well, they
in the
still do.
chat, yeah, they do. In
They
the
think
chat,
it
I've
was
sent you.
okay.
Well, you said you wanted to talk about the Hopewell because you
Well,
wanted
yeah,
proof. You wanted to see how there's absolute proof that mankind could see Jupiter, and that's what I've provided. Nobody
yeah,
else has
yeah,
ever provided. I'm the
yeah.
first one.
Oh, this is
Absolute proof.
great.
Of course, there's a
Yeah.
lot of myth and the myths are great. I believe the myths. I mean, I have no trouble believing the myths. But absolute proof is really fantastic.
Myths
And
are
thank God
history.
for the hope. Thank God for the Hopewell, because nobody else did that for us. I mean, you could say that the Göbekli Tepe, the Stele 43 does that. You could say that the Ramses Stele, and I detail that in the Solar Orb paper. Um, but some really cheeky person will say, well, it's a very low probability, but it's still a coincidence. In this case, there is no possibility of coincidence, and I'll step you through exactly why. I'll explain exactly why it's impossible for it to be a coincidence.
Okay.
And you'll be really the first one to get a full rundown of that. And then from there we can go into the Thunderbolts
Okay.
strike here in Kentucky, and then they are related. And
Okay,
then we
good.
can generally get plasma glyphs paper, because that paper we're probably going to have to dedicate a whole show.
Okay.
It's absolutely insane.
Oh, this is great. Yeah, my mom comes from Kentucky, so that definitely
No
interests
kidding.
me. Yeah, Albany, Kentucky. Yeah.
It's a wonderland, and once upon a time it was the Avatar jewel. I mean, it was the trees here and everything. There were natural gas furnaces that were always on fire, and the arches and the waterfalls here, and it was like practically a rainforest from here through to Tennessee, and it was just a real jewel of North America. And of course, it's been raped by some pioneers. But anyway, I'm ready to start whenever you want to open up the Hope. Okay, you got it open.
Yep, I got it open,
Um,
Ramon. Or I could just do
I
what I did with the last one, and we just go right into talking. People are
Yeah,
pretty quick
sure.
with
Well,
following.
all right. So if you want to start scrolling through, and then I'll
Well, the
try and
Hopewellian octagons. Let's just start right at the
yeah.
beginning.
Well, yeah. Well, you'll want to scroll down and give people a picture of what we're talking about, because a lot of people don't familiarize themselves with the nitty gritty of the earthworks there at Chillicothe, Newark, and High Bank. So there's our starting points right there. So
Okay.
if you look, oh, there's a Hopewell octagon. So
Yeah.
the earthworks you see here, I think at scroll down slightly. Of course, that's the North Pole of Jupiter.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was
That's yeah.
released a few years ago. There's
Okay.
Newark,
Okay.
okay, in Ohio. Now a lot of this has been destroyed, so we're relying on historic scans. Now, the thing that always interested me was two things. The first, aside from the Eagle Mound, but we'll stick away from the Eagle Mound for today. But I've done something special about the Eagle Mound as well.
Okay.
But and that'll be relevant in the plasma ghost paper. But the thing that really stuck out to me, before even the electric universe stuff, was the circle and square motif. And there's a saying in Chinese. They say that heaven is round and the earth is square.
Okay.
And there are three places in the world where these motifs have been put so strongly. One, of course, China. Two, in the Ohio River Valley, and three, in the Amazon. We're seeing the same thing. But sometimes they're not square. Sometimes they're these funny octagons. And if you look in the upper left, you see that octagon. Now, if you notice really carefully, it's not a symmetrical octagon. And on the next page, you also see the same issue at another site. So
Okay.
if you scroll down just a little bit,
Yeah. Right here.
scroll down just a little bit. Maybe I'm having lag, but there we go. Yeah. So
Okay.
you can see there. It looks symmetrical, but actually, if you measure with the calipers and protractor, what you're going to find is that they're not symmetrical. And they're almost none of the sides are the same length between the mounds. Each of those dots is a mound, and the angles, almost none of them are the same, and certainly the combination of them is unique. So this is really, really incredibly important, because if you go back up to the Jupiter's North Pole image, the North and South Pole, if we have an orthogonal view, you very faintly notice the same thing. So several years ago, I speculated on this in my plasma glyphs paper that it was not an accident, and that what we were looking at was a Jupiter map. Now, the implications of this are threefold. The first implication is, of course, that the north hemisphere of the Earth faced down over Jupiter as Earth passed over top of Jupiter.
Ooh.
Number two, that the Hopewell had to have trigonometry and or some kind of optical device to see, or we were close enough that they could see those storms perfectly. And number three, that they had writing after all. And my speculation being that they used bark or something biodegradable, or even burned the writing, because plasma glyph scripts, what we'll call plasma scripts, were probably sacred to them, just as the wheel. I contend that they knew exactly what the wheel was, but they just didn't use them because it was a sacred thing. So, and then wheels are still sacred in Native American tradition.
Yeah.
Now, so when I finally got time to set about, I'd already written the plasma glyphs paper. I got time to actually measure these out. So how did I step through this? First, I arbitrarily assigned an A, B, C, D, E all the way around. I just chose one corner of the Jovian vortices. Each of these vortexes, they're permanently on the North Pole. Of course, they're related to the Birkeland current. But they're there. Obviously, they've been there for hundreds, thousands of years, maybe. Okay, certainly thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. So I arbitrarily chose one of them to be my A, and then over on the Hopewell mounds, I chose the one at the neck to be A. And then I stepped through and I measured ratios of angles for each of the 3 points, their nearest 3 points. And I went around and did that 8 times.
Okay.
And then I compared the standard deviations and found the one that had the least. And what it came out to be was that the A turned out to be where that dot is, that black dot closer to the center of the North Pole of Jupiter. That's where the A is. So they placed the neck at that point. Now, secondly, to strengthen the proof, I also measured the lengths between the centers of the vortices and the centers of the mounds, and I found the ratios for those. Thirdly, I made a kind of like a fan-like structure where I take a particular corner, and then I fan out rays, and I get several different measurements of those ratios, and then I compare those with the same thing on Jupiter, because after I figured out which angles are which and rotated it around, I can then apply that same fan and see how close that ratio of each to each is. You get me? These are distances.
I think so. Yes.
And they're relative distances, right? And so it doesn't matter what the units are because it's all divided, right? Because when you use a ratio, the units go away. So it's all relative distances. Next, I take and make a cross, and I go across the distances, and I also do the diagonal.
Okay.
And so then I compare those ratios to those of the Hopewell octagon. And I do this not only at one Hopewell site, but I did it at Chillicothe, Newark, and High Bank.
Mm-hmm.
You get me? Then I just find out what the standard deviations are. Okay, so we can move on. Now you can see the south pole of Jupiter, by the way, is probably the origin of the pinnacle. And we probably passed right over both in between the 7,000 years ago and 5,000 years ago, forming the basis of Chinese cosmology. And a lot of magical traditions use the pinnacle. Incredibly important. Of course, you notice the center one looks like an eyeball. So continuing the eye motif, which would have started with Saturn and then come down through Jupiter to now. So the Lord, the Father became the Son, not begat the Son, but became the Son.
Okay.
And so his power being able to see through us, continuing on into the next age. Okay, so continue down.
Okay. It's amazing. Okay.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. And by the way, anybody listening, all of the lines that I drew are all provided and all of the spreadsheet are all provided, so you can verify for yourself, and you can do the work, and you can hem and haw about, is it up this a little bit percent or down this percent. I mean, it doesn't matter in this case, because the probabilities keep going down.
That's nice there. This is all in Kentucky now, or Ohio? Ohio.
No, these are in all Ohio. Yeah, these are in Ohio. Keep going.
I
so you can see the lines that I drew. So then these are the measurements I actually, and the triangles. Oh yeah, I forgot. I also did triangles. I created triangles and overlaid those to compare with the triangles on Jupiter.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now this is the North Pole, right?
That's the North Pole. So you can see originally I arbitrarily assigned A to be where you see it, but I found out that it's over here by the black dot. Now that's going to be important for a point that is the cherry on top. So you're going to see that. That's the thing that is the super kicker of this whole thing. So keep going.
The cherry on top. That's funny.
Yeah, there's a real cherry on top of this. On top of.
Is that why? Is that why they say with a cherry on top? Pretty pleased with the cherry.
Well, you know, you like cherries. Some people like cherries.
I love cherries.
I love cherries too.
Michigan is famous for cherries. Yeah.
You can see this average standard deviation within 5% in some cases. I mean, this is showing you which side for sure the triangular is facing. So you can see I tried out 4 different directions, and you can see all of them are okay, but one was under 5%. That proves that's where the A goes. That's where the vortex is, and that's based on the triangles I used. So keep going.
Okay.
It's a very clever way of overlaying and determining. So we can skip through a lot of this part. Okay, so now you're starting to see that I put the segment ratios together and showing where things are really starting to overlap, testing the ratios and average standard deviations. You keep going down. We don't want to bog them down too much with the graphs. Obviously, they can go through that. So then I calculated the probability of these things aligning up. Skipped over it there.
There. Okay.
No, go back up to the probability equation.
Probability. Okay. Right. Okay. Right here?
Right there. Yeah. So I calculated 2 versions of the probability equation. One being more conservative, where I use a average of different standard deviations, and the other one where I use the product of the standard deviations. And what I mean is that you take the standard deviations of so many percent, so many percent, and so many percent. It reduces it down. Either way, you end up with probabilities. You look at these 1 in 4.1 times 10 to the 45. Now, in engineering speak, that's 0. Mathematicians speak, it's not 0, of course, because it's exactly that very low number, 1 in 4.12 times 10 to the 45. But for an engineer, that's 0, because 10 to the 45 is an exceptionally large number. So there is, according to all these ratios of angles, triangles, crosses, ratios of segments, and fans, plus the fact that there are 2 poles on there, and there's also Jupiter and Saturn to compare with, there is 0 chance that they accidentally threw together an asymmetric set of octagons in 3 locations in Ohio that correspond to vortexes that are the size of Earth on the northern pole of Jupiter.
Wow. I had no idea we came that close.
Well, again, they could have had optics. Now, Rick Osman, who does Arthurian research, also associated with the ancient Kentucky, he raised the Golden Bear. He thinks that the Hopewell were basically, a lot of people think that they were Proto-Aztecs or Proto-Mayans, that they had giant mica reflection platforms, and they would make slightly concave observation decks, and that's where the mica from South Carolina was for that kind of use. The Aztecs like to get theirs from Brazil, I believe, but and that's quite a shipping feat. I mean, these sheets of mica were really, really big. Neil thinks that they have to do with electricity. I'm not going to argue. Is Neil right? Is Rick right? I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
either way, when they saw those angles, they had to measure them, and
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't walk on top. They couldn't walk on top of this mica; it would crack. So how did they do that? How did they measure it?
Right.
And they had to have used trigonometry. They had to have used trigonometry in order to get such precision. And then Then they had to stick a stake in the ground and say, "Dig here." And one of the other
Mm-hmm.
keys in my plasma eclipse paper is that these can't be only lunar and solar calendars. These giant earthworks, because you don't need something so big to measure shadows. You really actually only need something a few feet wide, and it would be much more convenient. And you certainly wouldn't spend all the calories when you have such a subsistence and agricultural lifestyle, hunter-gatherer supposedly lifestyle. You would not spend all of your calories making a lunar calendar. You would make one very quickly, and then you would move on. These people were doing it on purpose. They valued their relationship to the Lord, as the Chinese called the Most High One, or the Above God, which the symbols for the Above God are plasma scripts, and certainly originally came from plasma shapes and plasma glyphs. But the world religion at that time was all centered around this new coming king who took over, and his thunderbolts were renowned to shake the world. And certainly mankind had destruction, but then also, if you listen to the Greek myths, Zeus would toss stones over his shoulder and it would create mankind. That wasn't the only culture that said that. There were other cultures that said that the Thunder Lord tossed stones over his shoulder and created mankind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a remarkable thing to say. So how can we dismiss it so lightly? And what's the saddest thing is that this Hopewell culture, we know more about the Aztecs and the Mayans than we know about this Hopewell culture, because they didn't leave any writing behind that we could find. We found a few, what I would say are probably kings markers. They're tablets that were buried in the mounds, and they have a flowing kind of script on them, but they're probably just insignia of the king in that area. But only a few of those have been found. Other than that, no writing. Lots of art, but no writing. So people underestimate the value of these Hopewell octagons, and certainly of the meaning of the square and circle motif coming together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's incredibly important, I think. Now the cherry on top. Okay, so if you scroll down, let's get to the overlays. So what I did was I actually took the LiDAR and the images. I scaled them with proportions on in Photoshop to keep the proportions, the XY proportions, the same.
Okay.
And then I overlaid them for all the sites over top of the Jupiter's North Pole. So get down to those images. You'll know them because they're pretty popping.
Yeah, blue.
There we go.
Yeah,
they're blue. And then I compared them. These are all correctly aligned with the A where the A goes and the B where the B goes, etc. And I've tried to find the best alignment. And you can see how closely each site did at approximately. And of course, these vortices must wiggle around a little bit. However, the one that blows me away, go to the next page. I think it's the next page.
I might have went. No, that's
all right there.
I think you're talking about here. Yeah.
No, right there. Now I want you to look at. Yep, right there. Look at the one at the top, the exact north. If you look, that mound is behaving kind of odd. Don't you think? I mean, it's not like the other ones. It doesn't face exactly towards the center.
The one on the right or the one on the left?
The one on the very top. The top mound. Okay. It looks like it doesn't face exactly to the center. It doesn't look like it faces exactly to the center. The mound is the black. Right. Why did they do that? You have to think, like, if they could make all the other mounds face exactly to the center, Why did they make that one off? If you look, that vortex is the smallest, weakest, and it doesn't appear to align as perfectly as the other 7 vortexes around the center of the North Pole. Do you see that?
Yes.
So my speculation is that one actually wanders even more than the rest do, and that they were marking that it wasn't exactly where it was supposed to be, and since then has sort of wandered around. But if you place all the other all the mounds, remember these are LiDAR scans that I've cut as a whole, not individually, but as a whole, and then overlaid it over top of the Jovian mounds. All the other 7, when they are over the center, they're practically all exactly over the center except that one. So there's more purpose in their mound recordings than even I imagined, and that they could even tell which vortex was not as strong, and they didn't need infrared satellites, or maybe they had aliens, I don't know, but they didn't have. We have the infrared satellite, and those images were only released a few years ago, folks. They were only released a few years ago, and here they had this at least 1,500 years ago. I'm going to say that these sites go back to 3,500 years ago plus, and that what was happening is they just kept putting the dirt on every time they wanted to reestablish the religion. So when would they do that? They would do that at the end of the Jovian period, at the period where Inanna, Venus is going crazy, and then they would also do it when Zeus sends Athena away after defeating Ares in 3 battles, and then when Mars, when Velikovsky said when Mars came here in the 600s to 700s BC, and he became the Thunder Lord. Thor inherited the power from Odin. When that energy is exchanged, that would remind them of that power. And when do we see the beginning of the Adena phase? Is right in the 600s BC, and the Hopewell are descended right from the Adena. Now, I don't call them the Adena in my plasma ghost paper. I call them the Allegui because that's really what the people back then called them. If that's probably, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but they called them the Allegui. So all of our historic tribes really remember them as these practically gods. Same thing happened in Egypt, right? Anybody who knew the old religion became gods in the next iteration of things. And so these mounds were respected, and then they maintained them. So of course the dirt is younger. Of course the years are newer, but we can see clearly that it had to have been during the Jovian age when they built this site, which would take it back at least to 7,000 BC. The equivalent thing that was happening in Kentucky at that time was the creation, and then throughout many parts of the Southeast, was the creation of shell middens, where they were creating dark earths. And they were doing it with shell mussels and animals and bones and stuff. And why were they doing that? Because they were living on trees, because it was difficult after 7,000 years ago, the event. It was difficult to grow anything. We certainly don't see major agriculture anywhere in the world, but they were living off of trees. And we know that because there were nuts found in the basically what would be the remains of the bodies that are inside those shell middens. And after that, in the mound cultures that came afterwards, which would be the Hopewell and the Mississippians, who built different kinds of mounds, they stayed away from the woodland and particularly the archaic mounds that were shell midden mounds from the old days. And it's my speculation that they left Kentucky and the entire Tennessee River Valley and Green River Valley areas and went down to the Amazon and created, because we see the dark earth technology pop up later down there in the historic period. And of course, the Spaniards saw what a great civilization they became, and it all got wiped out by some other cataclysm again, not just disease, but some major event. So this culture that was here, it may have been a huge empire, but certainly no different than everybody else in the world, had that major religion centering around the Lord, around Zeus.
Okay. Okay, I'm getting a backup recording is all because I don't know
No,
if
no
Skype
problem.
is. I know I had it took me back to the top, so I have to go back. Where was I now? Oh
Oh,
boy. Oh, wait a
this
minute.
is
Wait a minute.
the
Okay.
plasma glyph paper. You're on the plasma glyph paper, yeah. So
Uh,
now,
oh
you
boy.
are you following me about the octagons?
Yes,
You're
yes, absolutely. Yeah, this
definitely.
is excellent.
I mean, as convinced as you were, I'm sure already by Velikovsky and Talbot and Wall now you're thoroughly 100% convinced, right? I mean, one
Oh,
in 10,
absolutely.
4 times 10 to the 50 to the 40 something power is zero in engineer speak. I mean, there's no chance that was coincidentally created. Certainly not at 3 sites.
Yeah. No,
So
well,
that pretty much covers the Hopewell octagons and describes. Of course, I'd welcome anybody to download the images and you can use my lines and measure the angles and you can scrutinize it. You're going to come up with an astronomically low probability, no matter what. Even the
yeah.
conservative one where I use the average. I mean, it still came up at such a low probability that it's in engineering it would be zero. So
This, yeah.
it's unbelievable. We are so lucky to have this proof on the ground. Now the thing is, that's not the end of the asymmetrical octagon story. That's
Hmm.
not the end. That's what's amazing to me. So
Hmm.
now we come to so after I had written the plasma glyphs paper, in
Hmm.
which by the way was instigated by an encounter with Thomas Jefferson, the beginner of vertebrate anthropology in America, and the chief of the Delaware. And he asked the Delaware what happened to the tremendous animals at the Big Bone Lick in Kentucky. And the
Hmm.
chief stood and he said that the great man came down and sat upon his mountain, not came down from his mountain, came down and sat upon his mountain, and with the stamp of his foot shook the ground and tossed thunderbolts and killed all of the animals that were destroying the bear and the elk and the deer that the creator created for man, and that he slaughtered them all with his thunderbolt until the last one, who was a bull who ran away to the north. And this is a very vivid story, and he was very serious when he told it to Thomas Jefferson. He meant it. The slaughtering of the mammoths and mastodons, because
Ah.
Thomas Jefferson was fascinated by the appearance of mastodon bones in England and or in Scotland, right, and in North America. And so he sent multiple expeditions to go collect some. In one case, there was an entire boat that it was full of them coming from the Big Bone Lick, and it overturned into the Ohio River, and it was all lost. So he sent Lewis and Clark to go get more. And they're still finding, by the way, whole skeletons at the Big Bone Lick. Every few years, they'll do a dig and they'll find more. And
Mm, yeah.
so the question is, how do you kill them? Now, I want to make a slight sideways talk about Graham Hancock and their theory.
Okay.
They're not wrong in that obviously it had to be a catastrophe. It could
Hmm.
not have been disease like an STD, and it could not have been humans hunting these animals. First of all, to hunt a mammoth or mastodon would be an incredibly dangerous task. It would
Of
not be worth
course.
the risk to losing a tribal member. It would only be worth it if you were very desperate. Secondly, one of them would last you so long, you'd never be able to slaughter enough using atlatls to end an entire species of these things, let alone, I think that there were 6 different mammoth species, plus
Yeah.
the mastodons,
Yeah.
plus the other megafauna. So something else. Now, what caught my attention is, and when I get to the plasma glyphs paper, I'll prove even further that Hancock and Carlson and them are on the wrong track.
Okay.
That Talbot and Thornhill are on the right track. But what
Hmm.
they haven't done is given you a mechanism. The story that the Delaware chief gave to Thomas Jefferson gives us the mechanism, and that mechanism is step potential or step voltage. It's the same thing. Now, when I did the calculations, I discovered something, which is that and this is based on the lightning physics work by Uman. Um, when you have a very large animal, the larger the distance between the hind and fore paws, or in our case, the front and back foot, the larger the distance, the greater the current that goes through the body. So that's number one reason why the megafauna suffered. Number two, the megafauna couldn't climb trees, and many of them didn't live in caves. Those that did live in caves, like the giant ground sloths, after the lightning would have gone by, so few of them would have been left that they wouldn't have been able to effectively breed, and probably would have become subject to hunting by the remaining giant predators. Any dire wolf or saber tooths that were left, they would have predated on them, being weaker and younger members, and their numbers, and then humans would have probably finished that off. So in that way, humans could be responsible for the extinction, but not for the kind of extinction that everybody's thinking. Right. Certainly, Native Americans have never been as destructive of megafauna as we were of the American bison. So right. the notion is actually, I think, insulting to the memory of these Native Americans who lived in such harmony. But they from the Delaware, we hear very specifically they prefer bear, elk, and deer because they can hunt them in a much more safe manner. Mastodons would be incredibly dangerous, and mammoths would be almost impossible. An elephant these days, if you try to hunt one with a spear, you're going to die. And it's going to kill 3 or 4 of you before all of you get away. Mm-hmm. So there's no way they were hunting these things, and they certainly weren't chasing them off of cliffs. Elephants don't really stampede like that. They stampede some, but they don't run off of cliffs. That's ridiculous. So when we look at the evidence, we do actually find, first of all, very few kills of mammoths where people have butchered them. And when there's no proof that they could have come upon the carcass from a lightning strike or some other means. Secondly, we have found mammoth bodies, and I got these from Randall Carlson, where the mammoth has been blown right off its feet. Literally, the feet still stuck in the ground, and the body's been blown to bits over yonder. So there's some kind of mega blast that is happening, and they're thinking comets, and I'm thinking thunderbolts. And the reason why I'm thinking that is
I'm with you on
the reason why. Think about this: if you're a comet. They're very ambiguous. Number one, Hancock. Did the comet start the Younger Dryas or end it? That's the first thing. Because if it started it with basically a nuclear winter, then why did it end? Why did it all melt suddenly? And if it ended it, how did a comet striking in the Greenland area, which originally they said Michigan? I already proved in my paper that it wasn't Michigan, and then the news came out that it was Greenland, and I was like, well, see, there you go, right? The Carolina Bays most definitely do not point all in the same direction, let alone to Michigan alone. And I've proven that in the plasma glyphs paper. But,
was there a strike in Michigan?
Say there probably was, but I'm going to contend it was electrical because of the copper deposits there that are embedded with silver, pure copper and pure silver mixed together. But at any rate, so if let's say you do strike it, let's say you strike it hard. Is it hard enough to melt the entire ice sheet? And if it is, why didn't it destroy every species on the planet? And even if it was a cluster, how did it also get the ice sheet in Siberia? Right? They never explain that because they can't, not with a comet. But you can if you generate enough joules to boil ice. And the only way you can do that is with Paratian thunderbolts. And I want to make that clear, folks, that the Paratian thunderbolts, when you calculate it all out, and it's in part 4 of my paper, when you calculate the amount of energy we're talking about, you can melt Antarctica with a mere dozen thousands of these thunderbolts of the gods. And apparently, at the end of the war of the Thunderbirds, all of it came down all at once in a giant maelstrom of thunderbolts and wind. So I do think that there were dozens of thousands of these giant thunderbolts. So then the question becomes, well, where do we see these things? Go ahead.
I was going to just ask you, when you said Thunderbirds, what is it that you're saying the Thunderbird was exactly?
Well, the Chinese used Thunderbird as the word for, I believe it's a thunderclap. but I think that they were probably a mixture of electrical shapes in the sky. Certainly, we know for sure that there is rock art, and obviously down there at the Nazca lines, there is a giant, the so-called hummingbird.
Hmm.
So there was some kind of shape. And by the way, the number of fingers on the right and left side of those of the Nazca, uh, they don't match each other, but they do match the number of fingers on the Kentucky Thunderbird that's been put in rock art here.
Hmm.
That's key because on one hand there's four and on the other hand there's five fingers. Well, you don't now the actual way it looks is slightly different. The head is different because of the angle change in view, but
Right.
the number of fingers on the feet of those birds is the same, and yet they're not, same left and right, but they're the same in the northern and southern hemisphere. So the Thunderbird was something that was seen overhead, and the it's interesting. Tolkien names the giant thunderbird in his cosmology book, The Silmarillion. He names him Thorondor, of course, th referring again to thunder. And the
Hmm.
T rune in Colbrin, the T rune in Colbrin is the Alwyn shape, which is showing up in North America as well as in Ireland and Europe and all over the world. That Alwyn shape is the Yao, and the Yao is well known among our anthropologists to be an early reference to God, not just in India where it's the triple Godhead, but in Christian traditions and all around the world, it is the Creator, Preserver, Destroyer. But it became the T rune, the early T rune, and then of course eventually it's flattened out and becomes the common T. But the th sound for thunder is not quite worldwide, but it's getting around the world, and that could
Hmm.
point to some. I'm not a linguistics expert, so that could point to some common origin of the language, but I contend that it is a common origin of seeing the rays coming down from the three bodies of uh, Mars and Venus and the Moon, but
Yeah.
them being the preserver of what? The preserver of the order of the Lord. And the Lord is a combination Lord. So it's originally the Elohim Lord, which is the Saturnian body, but then after loses his power is transferred. There's a Chinese script that shows that the above God is not really just, it has the cross stars, but it's
Yeah.
not it's the cross stars, it's the thing that's holding all four of them in its arms, meaning the power. And there's another meaning in the Egyptian where there's a transfer of power from the father to the son. And we see that in a Chinese glyph where a pulse of energy goes from one to the other. And there's a transfer, and there's a belief that the Lord then is basically embodied in the sun. And then it goes, of course, from Jupiter to Mars. So this continuation is really the power and the God in the ancient days. Does that
That's
make
just,
sense?
oh, of course, it's taken aback, really. I mean, no wonder that people were scared out of their wits when they have all these
Absolutely.
planets coming at them and so close to Jupiter. I'm assuming they
Yes.
didn't have optics, but perhaps they did. Still, I mean, we're talking about being closer than the Earth to the Moon, or at least
They were
at
very
that.
close.
Yeah,
I
very
would
close.
as
It's a wonder
I
we
would
didn't get
assume.
swallowed up.
Well, we obviously got close enough to one of Jupiter's moons to steal one,
Hmm.
and
So you think the
that
moon
that was.
came from Jupiter?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. They've actually compared the dust, and of course our
Ah.
angle and Mars's angle are the same. But
Hmm.
they've tried to grow plants in the moon dust. It doesn't grow, but in the Mars and Earth dust it does.
Ah.
So comparatively speaking, there's no doubt in my mind. And if you look at the backside of the moon, it looks exactly like a Galilean place. I'd say that the front side that's still electrotidally facing us, still locked towards us, is the side that we scarred. And I would say that's probably where the Grand Canyon came from, and the Ayers Rock and Stone Mountain and Devil's Mountain. I would say that It's the only body that's close enough to do that much damage to us. Now, could the rubbing of Magnus? Well, but Jupiter gave it in the Enuma Elish, right? Jupiter sends the Watcher moon over Tiamat's dead body and places the stamp of the tablet of destiny upon the corpse. That's what it says. And the ground shook because of that. And the word shock, the word electrical shock in Chinese means earthquake. So they're related. So when the moon applied its stamp, and that Janus being the two-faced god, right? The moon has two faces. That two-faced god was just an extension of the major god. And
so Janus, you're saying that Janus was the moon?
Well, that's the most obvious answer for a two-faced god. When you look at it, it's on its bold face. It's the two-faced god right in front of us, and that we have a very, I would say, tenuous relationship with. And it's a time limited relationship. It had a start and it has an end. The feeling that it gave was not necessarily a pleasant one. Certainly, there are stories that are detailed by Graham Hancock, and I place also into my paper for people's convenience, that show the moon caused a great flood, not the deluge, but a great flood. Through mega tsunamis, I would say. Okay. And so, how did it do that? Well, probably through electrostatic lift, but certainly it's still electrotidally locked to us. I mean, it's just like Pluto and Charon; they're always facing this. It's always facing us. So over time, I guess we would eventually become lock and step with it, but we haven't been with it that long, really. If you really think
electrostatic lift.
Yeah, like where the electric force can actually, where there's charges and there's an electrostatic force that can attract two bodies together, just like a balloon when you rub your hair and then you get the hairs stand up. That's electrostatic, and of course being lifted up. Yeah,
I was thinking something else when you said that, lifting up the ground.
Why not?
Lands traded places.
Right. Why not? I mean,
that would be a good explanation, actually, because I'm thinking that the ground just caved in. I'm thinking, God, I hope that never happens again.
I have no doubt that if you pass, of course, in the beginning, the moon would have been closer to us, and then would kind of have a haphazard circulation, and then reach its current generally safe distance. But it comes in and out still. It does. It comes closer and it goes further away all the time.
It certainly looks that way when it rises.
Well, it absolutely does. There are times when it's closer to us and times when it's further away. And if you look at any eclipse map, it never follows the same pathway. It's going all over the place. It's calculable with computers. But the Chinese had a heck of a time. I have an entire paper from the ancient days has been translated of them trying to figure out ratios to use that would predict the pathway of the moon, because they needed to, not because they needed to know when to plant, but because they were afraid of when the eclipse might presage another catastrophe. And they were obsessively following it. In fact, if you failed at that job, you could lose your head. So it was an incredibly important job. But now we have computers that can calculate all these eclipses exactly to the moment. We care enough to do it, which is telling you that we certainly took the job really seriously. But the moon has lots of signs, and it's in the appendix of my paper of the discharge. Of course, Wall has since I did my paper, he has put out a video talking about that, and or was it Andy Hall put out a fantastic video talking about the scarification on the moon. It's the most obvious candidate right in front of us for direct thunderbolts. Now, again, it's totally possible that magnetosphere rubbing induced giant thunderbolts. And I would say that is a very likely candidate, because anytime we would have gotten close to Jupiter, it would have appeared that he approached us, right? Odin was always wandering about. Odin was in his sickle. And if he approached us and suddenly there was a thunderbolt, or the ground suddenly shook, or there was a groan and you heard the yow sound, or Yahweh, or Yuahu in Cherokee, Yuahu, whatever sound it was, you would have certainly been feared for your life. Head for the hills, head for the caves. The Cherokee were the people of the caves here in Kentucky, because it was what enabled the people to survive from the 7,000 years ago to the modern period. And that's why Kentucky was so sacred. On one hand, On the other hand, the stamp of his foot. Remember, there was the stamp of his foot, and he sat upon his hill and on his mountain, and then he tossed the thunderbolts. So now let's talk about a thunderbolt stamp that I found. So I run the Hidden Kentucky project, and I've uncovered all sorts of stuff about Kentucky that even the state doesn't know about, really. I mean, somebody in the state knows about, not the state tourism or anything like that. There are 3 supposed astrobleams here. There's the very famous one at Middlesboro, which created the Cumberland Gap, and in which there's a city inside of it. It's not the only city inside of Crater, but it's one of the only famous ones for sure. There's another smaller blast called Jephthah Knob, and then there's a Big Sink. Now, in the Palladian Thunderbolts, let's find the Palladian Thunderbolts paper. Be one of the other downloads that you did.
Okay.
The Plasmaglyphs one, I was basically running with a couple of ideas, and I said later on these things should be tested. And so I mentioned that I think that that there's a Thunderbolt here, but I didn't know for sure. Now, after I did all the calculations of all the power levels of the Thunderbolts that would have come from the moon at certain, at say a distance of a third or a quarter to the Earth or halfway, I then went and found more of Dr. Anthony Peratt's papers in which he details these 56 rayed structures that come down that, of course, have been written about by the Aborigines in Australia and like put on their ceilings, etc. So scroll down here.
Okay. This is amazing stuff, man. I'm just blown away by it, really.
Thank you.
Serious.
It came rather naturally because I was already working on the Hidden Kentucky project and doing the ancient Kentucky work about the Arthurian stuff. And then he was talking about the 56. So you can see here a quote from his paper about the strength. The total current about 7 megaamps. If it pertains to 28 filaments, then each one would be 250 kiloamps. If you use Gold's numbers, then you multiply everything up by basically 1,000. You scale it up by 1,000, and you end up with a 7 gigaamp burst from a single. That would be from a single burst. Okay, so we're not talking the carving of the Grand Canyon here. We're not talking the lifting of Lake Titicaca. We're not talking about the formation of Andy Hall's super vortex in the southwest. We're just talking about a single bolt that's come down from the sky, magnetospheric rubbing probably, but it could be also Hermes, right? The messenger of Zeus, Mercury, before Mercury was captured by the sun, probably because it lost all electrical charge in discharging it on the earth, was a messenger of the Lord. And so these Galilean bodies are probably all prime charged, ready to zap us. So I found this crater. This is the Big Sink. And there's something that you got to notice about it. It doesn't have a bow shot. And when you look at Middlesboro, when you look at Jephthah Knob, when you look at the dinosaur one, Chicxulub, or however you say that, they all have a bow shot because something impacted something. If you shoot the ground with a bullet, it creates a bow shot because that energy has to distribute and spread out. And it also has out vents. Now here they appear to be out vents, but they're not out vents at all. All right, there's no particular bow shot. So what I did was I just counted the number of craters, and it's 56, right around. And now if you look, it's not a circle either. If you turn your head a little bit to the left, you can see it's an asymmetrical octagon.
Yeah.
You see that?
Yeah.
If you turn your head a little bit left.
Yeah.
So now you have a Jovian religion, including Jehovah. I mean, it's what we're talking about here. You have Octagon North Pole. You have Octagon Earthworks, and you have religions all around the world centered around thunder. And now you have a electrical strike site, which, by the way, is really pretty up close, and you wouldn't even know. I mean, it's so smooth nowadays with all the erosion, you just wouldn't even know. And it's a mile wide. And it's in a limestone bed, so this electricity would have spread out. Now, my paper, I used Umann's model, which is a spherical propagation of the step potential, but I think if somebody went back and did cylindrical calculus
Mm-hmm.
and calculated a propagation through, and it should probably be done as cylindrical because there's only limestone is only so thick ultimately in the crust. It would probably propagate cylindrically. It probably goes even further than the distances that I measured that are recorded in part 4 of the plasmaglyph paper. But some of them on the maximum for a single pulse discharge was 60,000 meters, which is a long ways for a single thunderbolt to travel with a distance that would kill a man. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, the amount of power as it spreads out through lime. Now, if you put one of these in a limestoney place like Kentucky, karst topography, wet soil, this thing could propagate. It could propagate through a quarter to half the size of Kentucky. We don't know. We've never experienced that kind of electrical power anywhere on the planet. But now, if you keep scrolling down, you're going to see what they
I'm
did.
just interested. This earthwork here, it's interesting. You know,
Oh,
then
that's a horse track. That's a horse track. Lexington, Versailles is the so-called horse capital of the world.
it almost looks like a paperclip, you know.
Yeah,
But I see the horse track, and then there's like a little path almost right to the. Okay.
Yeah, that's probably a road. That's probably a road. There's your 56 stars.
Yeah.
And you can see the octagon shape. Now this next earthwork is located. That's from the Palladian Thunderbolt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now scroll down.
Okay.
Now this mound, the sea hinge mound, is located about a mere 20 miles. You can see here it's 20 kilometers. Sorry, 20 kilometers from the strike site.
Okay.
Which is nothing. When you're originating something in the plasmasphere, it's like nothing to just change one of them over to come over and burn an anode to create an anode blister. And the mouth of the hinge mound faces the Thunderbolt. And on top of that, get this: Wilson and Blackett came here, or Alan Wilson came here on an expedition with the Ancient Kentucky. They were looking into the Arthurian tradition, and apparently there's a tradition where a king is buried about a mile to 2 away from the mouth of these sea hinges. And wouldn't you know, there is a long burrow mound, which is the kind that you put bodies in, located about 1.75 miles away from the mouth, en route from the Thunderbolt sea hinge towards the strike site.
Amazing.
So there's a long burrow mound. Yeah, of course it's been raided by now, but it's still there. Okay, so let's scroll down. Now the thing is about this sea hinge mound, it has a certain diameter, obviously. So I took and I actually there's a whole video on the Electric View. I took the exact Photoshop without changing the size and using the LiDAR. It fit exactly inside of one of the burned out craters of the larger Thunderbolt strike site. And I mean exactly. And in fact, the hole at the sea hinge overlapped a place where there's a crater rim discharge. And I'll show you that. So keep going. These are just calculations of the voltage power levels. I mean, we're talking massive current levels that are just
in-depth work, man.
Unbelievable. Now you can see how many lightning bolts each of these is worth. At 1,000 kilometers, hold on, go back. We'll get to that one. But you can see how many lightning bolts. Go back up. Oh, what happened?
You must be lagging a little bit. I'm on page 7.
That must be what's going on. I don't know where it was now. If you go up or down, there we go. Hold on, go up a little bit more.
Go up a little bit more. Okay.
There it is. There it is. Page 6. That is.
Okay. Page 6. Page 6. Okay.
Yeah, page 6.
Yeah. Got it.
You can see at 1,000 kilometers. Look at how many lightning bolts this energy from the Palladian heights, from all the way up in the plasmasphere we're talking about. 2.2 times 10 to the 9. So 2.2 billion lightning bolts of energy I mean, it's
Wow.
just unbelievable the amount of energy that we're talking about. Now, if you look at the kilocalories level, 2.7 times 10 to the 15 kilocalories. Now you have something that you can melt ice with, 2 miles of ice, times the size of two continents. Now you have the kind of
Mm-hmm.
energy you need to melt and selectively kill certain things and not other things. Like, for example, kill the short-faced bear, but not the black bear and the grizzly bear, because black bears climb trees and young grizzly bears climb trees and brown bears climb trees, right? But
Mm-hmm.
but short-faced bear did not climb trees, so it didn't make it.
Didn't
And
make it.
often wolves often live in dens, but dire wolves, there's no proving that dire wolves lived in dens. Certainly, they wouldn't have been very large a number in the beginning, anyway. So,
Mm.
how do you selectively kill some species and not other species? Electricity is the best way. It's the only real, and of course, the combination of factors afterwards, the disease, the drought, the famine, the hunting, the competition for food, all of those things are contributing factors, which is why some took longer to die off than others.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Oh.
so keep scrolling down.
Okay. There's page
I do,
7.
I do more. Yeah, it's lagging. I do more
Page.
calculations to show, just obviously people have to access the spreadsheets to click on the equations to see, where these are. These are all based on, Maxwell's equations and things like that. So we're just using VIR to calculate the currents and the distances here, and
Yeah.
it's all more math. So
We're on
here's an
page 9.
example of, yeah, one of the craters. It's 76 meters across, which is about 200 feet, um, and it's at the Big Sink. So it's one of the 56. You can see that there's a crater rim discharge, and if you look really closely where the arrow is pointing, you can see the edge of where the crater was, and then another crater formed and burned it out. Do you see that edge?
Yeah. I
It's almost
do.
like the circle wants to continue. Right. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's a pond now. Okay, so we're looking with LiDAR through the water at the ground.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Now, scroll. If we scroll down,
Okay.
so the sea hinge mound fits exactly inside of that crater.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So now I went to the sea hinge mound, and it's owned by the University of Kentucky. It's called Mount Horeb, and
Okay.
there's no burials inside of it, and they've never found bodies there. They did find stones in the center, probably as an altar. Um,
Okay.
so I got permission, went up there, and I did electromagnetic measurements of the behavior of the sea hinge mound. But before we look at those, just look at what we're seeing here. We're seeing the Amun Ra. We're seeing him inside the Aten, the egg. We're seeing the cosmic pole, and we're seeing, of course, the center dot inside of the thing. But we're seeing the crater, the anode blistering that Wall and company talk about, and the crater rim discharge. So, a priori, I said that we should expect to see electrical and magnetic activity in the neck of the
Yeah.
crater rim, because the neck had special significance. Now, I did this work separate from the Hopewell octagon paper, but we know
Mm.
that the neck represented the connection from the circle to the square, and was associated with that the place where that one vortex had the black spot, right?
Yeah.
So I'm speculating that the people divined that the divine order itself wanted them to enter at that hole, and that's why a burned out section was left, and then would have shaped it beautifully to produce the overall shape, and that's where the actual original shape would be. So I hypothesized this prior to actually going and doing the electromagnetic measurements on site.
Okay.
Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
you can see here, and we took a team of people out, and everybody, measured everything, and then I entered it in and created 3D surface graphs.
Yeah, that's great.
Have you gone
Okay.
to the I can't see it
No,
if you
I
have.
have not been to any of these, but I'm going to have to this
No,
summer.
I mean the next bit. Have you been to
Oh,
the? Okay.
no, I have not seen any of this before. Okay, Tri-Field. I'm at the Tri-Field.
Right. So you can see with the tri-field, it didn't really do a good enough job, in my opinion. So we had a device that Michael Claridge, actually from Sapphire, recommended to me, and we used that device to get better electric field measurements. And then for the magnetics, we use the tri-fields, and for the electric, we use the other one.
Okay.
Going
Okay.
down.
Electron field, proton field.
Right. So now you can see the neck. There it is. The neck is where the electric field is showing up stronger. In this
The
case,
red.
that's
Yeah.
using positive measurement. If you go to the negative measurement, you can see it's also strong, but not quite as strong. And look how it's strong right upward to the center of the crater, to the
Mm.
center of the mount. You see how it goes
Yeah.
over? So
Right. Yep.
those are the neck. Now everything's flipped. You have to use the 8 and the 1 through 10 in order to correlate with what you see on the LiDAR. But I promise you that area of high energy on the left is the neck, where the crater rim discharge was. So
Mm-hmm.
even thousands of years later, this thing is active. And
Hmm.
it's active, and people can feel it. People who don't do, I do Tai Chi and Qigong, and I'm an acupuncturist and all this stuff, right? So, but people who don't can feel it. They can walk right in and they can just feel that there's energy emanating from this site. And it's not the only one in Kentucky, certainly not the only Sea Hinge mound in the Ohio River Valley. And of course, there's plenty of them over in the British Isles. Scroll down. Yeah, these Sea Hinge mounds are all over the place. And nobody's ever said why. Why are some perfectly circular and why are some C-shaped? So I put this into a simulator for a loop antenna, and it
Mm-hmm.
came out with frequencies that approximate the plasma. All right, very low frequency energy, and
Mm-hmm.
we had a whole discussion about the electric view. It's fantastic. It's still acting as a loop antenna, as a piece of dirt. So I'm not speculating that the Hopewell had, and this site is even older, right? This goes back to the Adena, so closer to the Mars event. That's official dating.
Mount
That's
Horeb.
like 300, 300 BC, kind of dating. But I am
Mm-hmm.
speculating that they knew of the internet. They just didn't. They may not have known what a loop antenna was, but they certainly knew that there was something special happening. And people
Yeah.
have told me that they have been at that site, and that when the sun starts going down, that lightning will come out of the ground and start coming towards you, and it freaks them out. Of course, they leave right away. So this is the Burrow Mound that is 1.45 miles, not 1.75 miles, exactly from the mouth. Remember, the mouth is facing the giant Thunderbolt strike
Yeah.
site, and this is just a little burn, just one little ray out of the 56 that streamed over and zapped the spot. And
Mm-hmm.
so after every living thing is dead, at least as far as things that walked on the ground, the people would have come back and they would have worshipped. And where would they worship? Naturally, at the place where there was an entrance to go into the egg, into the Lord's womb, and to give obeisance to this great power.
Yeah.
And notice it's near water. I mean, most of the time they are near water. That's probably an electrical reason. I'm not sure what else there's left in this paper.
All right. I suggest that we do a couple of these because
Uh,
I have quite a bit of material already, and I'd like to do this again and have an opportunity to
problem.
go over some of this stuff.
This is all just the Greenland stuff, talking about the mega tsunamis and stuff like that. That was
Okay.
just me updating, and because remember, by this time, Graham Hancock and the company had been proven wrong that the comet strike site is actually up in near Greenland, but it's part of a cluster of them. And this is just
Oh,
me showing,
flood map.
the flooding. Yeah, these are the flood maps that would have been associated with such huge mega tsunamis.
So where I live
And
right now is underwater.
well, if you have a 350 meter wave, I mean, a lot of places are going to be underwater. That's for sure.
No doubt. I hope that never happens again. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, I know, right?
Huh, that would be awful. Okay.
It would be very, very, very awful. And barring any kind of rogue planet or Jupiter gets tired of one of its moons and sends it towards us, I think that we'll be okay.
I think
So
we're at the
that's those two
reference.
papers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's those two papers, and then these were written after the plasma glyphs paper, which is a mega paper. I mean, it is a huge paper that you'll want to
Yeah.
get through
Yeah. Let's
and
do
get
that.
very familiar with the comments. You'll want to get familiar with those contents because it's a four-parter with a huge introduction and appendices. A lot of images. It's going to
Okay.
take
Good.
you definitely a lot of time to dissect that one.
Man, I love this.
Thank you. I enjoy the rest of the papers. All of them are pretty interesting.
Oh, I'm going
Even
to.
the one on Ferris wheels is pretty fascinating. I always found it really fascinating, kind of in a macabre sort of way.
Uh-huh.
Places where we go and try to nearly die, but also not die, obviously, because no one wants to die. But we get this thrill out of nearly dying, and we use the electricity to do it. And there's all tons of motifs in there. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, and
And the
people
dark matter
love to be
papers are
scared
interesting.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. But
Yeah.
the fact that we do it using the archetypes is what really gets me.
Hmm.
But the Arthurian stuff, the Chinese stuff, and then there's all my bio electric research from in clinic, from actual in clinic electric field measurements. There's a whole gold mine of things. Of course, I source everything you saw at the end of the references. In fact, I have a paper that takes all the tables and images from 25 of the 30 some odd papers, and the
Hmm.
citations alone took almost 20 pages. I mean, my poor assistant was just constantly, writing up these bibliographies. I mean,
Hmm.
I was wearing her out every week. I was giving her new ones to do, and
Hmm.
it was a lot of work, no doubt about it. It was like a burning passion.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So,
Yeah, look it up. South Viking Cherry.
Hyperborea was Antarctica. That's a
It
new
has
one
to
for
be.
me. Yeah.
There's no continent. There's no continent up there
Who
in the
knows what
north.
they're finding there right now?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, obviously the U.S. government on some level knows. But I mean, we see
Oh,
from
for
the
sure.
Piri Reis map that ice has been adding ever since, and it's accelerating. More and more ice keeps getting thicker there.
They keep
And
saying
here's
now
the other.
it's melting. So which one is it?
Well, it's melting on some parts, but it's getting thick in the middle. I mean, it's getting really
Mm-hmm.
thick.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll tell you something else. Another proof for you. The flash frozen mammoths. They have
Mm-hmm.
food in their stomach, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That, as you know, Velikovsky detailed that those plants couldn't grow, but for 1,000 miles
1,000 miles
south.
away. Yeah.
Right. Now, think about the Orkney Islands. 7,000 years ago, they had villages in balmy conditions and stone couches and sofas and manors. They had manors that people lived in, like villas. Now,
Mm-hmm.
why is it so cold now? Because it used to be at the level of Patagonia. So
Mm-hmm.
if you flip the Orkney Islands and Scotland and all that down to where Patagonia is, you'd have a completely different climate.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Now, what about the erratic boulders? What do you think it was that moved all of them?
I'd say water did some, and I'd say the
Yeah.
electrostatic did some of it, and then high winds did some of it too.
Yeah, I'm picturing these things flying through the air. Could you imagine? These massive boulders flying
Oh,
through the
it would be
mountains on top of other mountains. It's crazy.
into the world, into the world
Yeah.
kind of thing,
Oh,
It's,
absolutely. With how close we
well,
were to Jupiter and all of these things in Kentucky, I didn't know they existed.
Well, I'm glad. I think that you'll enjoy. Of course, a lot of it just confirms things you really
Oh
actually
yeah.
already
Oh,
know.
absolutely. Yeah. Now, what do you think about the so-called Kincaid thing in the Grand Canyon? Do you think that's for real, or is that just
Kincaid. What is
hyperbole?
it?
The
Tell
mummies,
me,
the
what do you
ancient
mean?
Egypt. And, did you watch
Oh,
my show through?
I have no doubt that people all over the world were performing mummification. As for whether or not it's Egyptian or not, it probably isn't. But at the same time, it's not impossible. The Egyptians have been certainly found as far away as Australia. There
Yeah,
are the Gosford glyphs.
yeah.
Um,
Well, to find
but
out King Arthur was in America, it blows my mind too. So
yeah,
that's very
yeah,
crazy.
that's going to be a fun one. I did a whole show. I did a whole show on that on
We're gonna have to
Leak
talk
Project
about
on
that.
Rex's channel. We
Yeah.
will. We no problem.
Oh,
Anytime you want. I mean,
I love this
first read
stuff.
those two papers though.
I will.
Go back to go back to the academia. I'll point out which two papers it is.
Okay.
Um,
Uh,
you'll alt tab over to the.
okay. Now where am I at here? This is the first one. We did these two. Now where
Uh,
is? Okay, academia. All right.
just the main, yeah, just the main page of
Okay.
them.
Solar orb in Egypt.
No, it won't be
One.
that one. Hold on, I'm lagging behind you. Okay, so that's for you. That's the one with the Ramses Slate. Now go to that's a great paper.
Yes, I'm definitely going to read that.
Uh, click the middle tab because you're on the first tab. Click the middle tab.
The middle tab over here.
No,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
right.
I'm
Go to
there. Yeah,
there. You go. All
yeah.
right. So if you go, so Shangdi, Heaven and okay, whoops, you're
Dynant
moving all over
dash.
the place.
Ang-
Okay, so
Forgot.
scroll up. Okay, so right there. Oh, dang on it. Oh man, you went too
What?
far.
Oh,
Yep,
sorry.
that's okay. Well, there's the Paradian Thunderbolt. Okay. Okay, so the Camelon, the Camelot, that's one,
Okay.
and then scroll down. The Uchel High Lord and Shangdi. But to read the Uchel, the High Lord, and Shangdi, you might consider reading Shangdi, Heaven and Tao. It's a lot of Chinese scripts, but it might give background for the Uchel, the High Lord. Uchel, the High Lord, is the name in Kolbrin for the Lord, and of course the runes are the subject of that paper. The but So I would read it personally. Well, a lot of people started with the Sumo paper because the Sumo paper preceded the Shangdi Heaven and Tao paper, which then preceded the Uchel the High Lord. These are in order, by the way. The oldest ones are at the bottom, and the newest ones are at the top. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
The newest ones at
Yeah,
the top. Yeah, yeah, sure.
newest
That,
ones are the top. So the Sumo paper came first, and then the Shangdi Heaven and Tao, then the Uchel the High Lord, then the Camelot paper, and then the Tai Chi paper, and all of those have Chinese scripts behind it, and it's authentic sinological evidence. Obviously, I interpret it different than the sinologists do.
mhm.
But the let's take the Shangdi Heaven and Tao paper. That's a response to a paper that a guy put out, and he was trying to figure out who Shangdi was. Because in some contexts, Shangdi is God. Sometimes he's the spirit world. Sometimes he's the body of the God. And there's a hierarchy, and sometimes there's no hierarchy. And I was like, well, this is exactly the problem of El and Elohim. And so I go through and I show that all of these issues are solved using the electroplasma cosmology. And so that's what that paper is. And then that leads naturally into Uchel the High Lord, because now that same thing is happening with the Welsh traditions in Arthur. And I compare that with the Chinese Shangdi. And then comes the Camelot paper. And it's all very, I mean, the Camelot one is really unbelievable. I've been very proud of my research.
I
I
think
wish
it's
that
amazing.
I wish the Thunderbolts people understood, and and really understood what they had in front of them. I wish that Dr. Anthony Peratt could get a hold of my Perattian Thunderbolts paper, and it'd blow him away that there's because it's one thing when he examined all that stuff down in Mexico and down in South America. All that stuff shows evidence, but it's all there's so much scarification, it's hard to see. This is an exact stamp, the tablet of destiny. Bam, stamped down.
Yeah.
The stamp of his foot. Boom. And there's 56 rays. Boom.
Tablet
there
of
it
Destiny.
is.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what the Delaware, you'll see in the plasma glyphs paper. That's what the Delaware chief said.
Look at
that's
first.
what he said that to Thomas Jefferson. He said with the stamp of his foot. And meanwhile, the Sumerians said that the Marduk placed the stamp of the Tablet of Destinies upon Tiamat's corpse. That's what they say in the Enuma Elish. So that dates when the Perattian Thunderbolt happened, and it also dates, unless it happened in a previous age, to that. But I doubt it, because this is very soft dirt above the limestone. It would have all eroded away. It would be unrecognizable. So I think that it happened within the last 7,000 years, and I think that it's about the same age as the Enuma Elish, and it's about the same age as those mounds up in Ohio. And the asymmetrical, never forget the asymmetrical octagon. That's the thing that teaches us.
Now, which one are we going to do next time?
Well, you're going to go through the plasma glyphs paper, but I know that you're itching to go through you're itching to go through the Arthur stuff.
Yeah.
I'd say let's do the plasma glyphs first, because it'll be part 2 to this. And
plasma petroglyphs, earthworks, and megafauna extinction.
Yeah, it's a mega paper, buddy. It's 180.
Oh.
It's 180 pages.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah,
you have my permission to get it. You have my permission to get it printed out. It's no big deal if you want to get it printed into because it's very colorful. Number one, it's very colorful. Go down to the appendices of that paper. Go to the very end of the paper. There's an entire section about the moons. There's the Thunderbird. You saw that flash by.
You have good eyes.
Oh, thanks. Well, this thing lags, and it shows okay. So now, if you go up from the references, you'll go through I've got a series of plates, M plates for I think is that for Mars? I think it's for Mars, and then I got P plates for plasma, and S plates for serpent mounds. All sorts of really cool things to discuss that are at the end of that, and the appendices are just fantastic. Of course, Wall, like I say, Wall went through a lot of these in his. I've produced a lot of products for the Electric Universe community. I wish that they embraced them, because that's who I made them for. I didn't make them for Nature Magazine and for Phys.org. I made them for you guys.
Okay.
Because I wanted you all to have weapons in your back pocket.
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. Well, you're going to start getting some exposure to all that I can help.
Buddy, well, I'll tell you what, I've been on Leak Project. I've been on, the Electric View. I've been, and now I'll be on yours. I've been on Monday Night Live.
So people know about you. Okay, that's good.
But again, but Michael Claridge knows about me, and Walt Thornhill knows about me, and I've still never been asked to come on. I have no idea why.
To come on what?
To do a space news.
You should. You should definitely do a space news. That's
they've never asked me to come speak or anything, and some of these people have been asked to speak and they've never produced a thing. So I don't know.
It's just super good work, Ramon. I'm just so impressed. I don't want to fawn all over you, but it's just amazing. It's some of the best work I've seen. Really.
Well, I appreciate it, and I try to attribute everything. I may screw up from time to time, but I do try.
Well, I'll tell you what, I got a lot to work with here, so
Yes, you do.
Whenever you're ready to do the next episode, I will be hungry for it. I'm going to go through this petroglyph stuff.
Yeah, you're going to enjoy it. I mean, even the electricity part, you're going to just be like, wow, this is such interesting stuff.
Yeah,
it took me a year took me a year to write the daggone thing, and I had to consult various professors of plasma and things like that. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm sure Eugene or somebody could shred it to pieces, but nobody's done anything like it. And I'm certainly the first person who said that step potential was what killed off the megafauna, truly killed them off, and also melted the ice. Nobody's talking about that.
Makes sense to me.
You got to be able to melt. You got to be able to melt the ice.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't do that if you have a comet who's too strong. Then you killed everything. And if you have a comet that's too weak, you've done nothing.
I take it you're not an advocate for the moon being a spaceship, then.
No, I'm not an advocate. No.
Okay. I didn't think you would be.
No.
There's some people who put forward that.
We'll talk some point about my version of the Hollow Earth, though.
Okay. Okay. That sounds good. I'm into all that stuff.
All righty.
All right, man. Well,
I appreciate it, and okay. I'm glad that I knew you would love it, man.
I love it. Yeah.
I've been posting on your channel for like a year, telling you gotta read through.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it takes me a little while.
It's all good. You have such a I would say eclectic interest, such a great sources. At one point, I was like, I gotta somehow archive all the citations and things that he's using, but I couldn't keep up. I mean, you really have good stuff. We got to work together to get all that backed up in terms of quick references for people to access.
I'm trying to do that, and it's not easy. It's not, because sometimes I even forget. But I just go digging and I find it. Yeah. It's coming along. It's coming. It's gregjchannel.net if you ever want to check it out.
I will.
So,
I will check it out.
All right. Well, then hopefully soon I'll be going through this. You take your time. Let me know when we can do it again, and I'll be ready.
Absolutely, brother. And have a great night.
You too, buddy. Keep in touch. Thank you.
I will.
All right. Bye-bye, Ramon. Take care. Hello. Well, I hope you enjoyed the first segment of the show. We are going to be doing a part 2. I want to thank Ramon for coming on and giving me his time. If anyone from the Thunderbolts group has seen this, it's pretty compelling information. Hopefully, it will be good enough to get Ramon his guest appearance on Space News. I think that would be cool.
Jupiter swiped it from Saturn, and then the Sun finally swiped it from Jupiter. So the Earth is a little bit of a pass around patootie. Tootie.
Well, that'll do it for me tonight. I'd like to thank my guest, Ramon. Looking forward to part 2. Don't be afraid to use your imagination or let others paint your history. Poke a hole in the status quo. People like to be appreciated. To my PayPal and Patreon supporters, I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you. That an organism at war with itself is doomed. Good night.
for me. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you.